Sonic stories are phenomenal. If you're watching this video, there's a big chance you are probably well aware of this, but this is a sentiment that often evades the public conscience. Most people, when they see Sonic, sees a iconic platformer with fun, cutesy characters and lighthearted stories, when in actuality, that is definitely not the case. While yes, Sonic can be lighthearted, they are often the catalyst for wonderful themes, satisfying character progression, and heavy subject matter. Most American Sonic fans got their first taste of this with the release of 1998's Sonic Adventure, which was the first mainline Sonic game that actually had the benefit of what was then modern technology to actually tell a semi-cinematic story with evolving stakes, character progression, and much more. But then Sonic Adventure 2 entered development, and Sonic Team wanted to expand upon the craziness of Sonic Adventure 1. They wanted to refine that game, refine what made it work, and the story was no exception. Enter writer Shiro Makaira. Shiro Makaira had worked on previous Sonic games in the past, but now was his chance to be the lead writer in this upcoming Sonic game. An important part of understanding SA2 is understanding this guy's mindset. Not only did he understand Sonic and what worked about it, but he also shared the same intentions as everyone else at Sonic Team with the creation of SA2, which was basically creating a game that exceeded all expectations. And so Makaira went, what happens if you take something like Sonic the Hedgehog and blended it with high-stakes American Hollywood sensibilities? Well, what you get is what we got in 2001. I don't think I can really overstate the impact that SA2 had on the series. This game was like no other. While I do love Sonic Adventure 1 and I do think it does stand the test of time, that game was Sonic Team throwing a lot of concepts at the wall and seeing what stick. Whereas SA2 is taking what stuck and dramatically improving it and refining it and polishing it to create a more unified, well-rounded experience. And because of this, Sonic Adventure 2 is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. But it's because of something else that makes it my favorite Sonic game of all time, that being the narrative. Before we get into that, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Sonic content I upload pretty frequently. With that said, let's talk about this behemoth. What better way to start than with how the actual game starts?
現在両機は首都上空を南下中。機体航路とも異常なし。こちらコントロール、そちらの機体位置を確認した。捕獲したハリネズミの状況を報告せよ。現況報告。現在移送中の容疑者は。どうした？ハリネズミがいません。同乗した仲間が全員。どうした？現況報告しろ。やめろ！早まるな！こっちに来るんだ。機内上映も機内食もないんじゃねえ。それに俺は走る方が好きなのさ。
So let's have a little recap of what we just saw. The Sonic the Hedgehog is now a military fugitive being held captive on a helicopter that he then escapes from, tears a piece off of, and uses it as a skateboard to skate down the streets of San Francisco. This intro has been talked about to death, and I don't really have much to add to the discussion here, but this is just a perfect way of segueing into the craziness that is this narrative. When I said that Shiro Makaira really wanted to blend Sonic with just the craziness of what was at the time modern day Hollywood, he was not bluffing. SA2 is set sometime after SA1, where the first event that actually happens in the game is Eggman uncovering a secret facility housing some sort of project created by his late grandfather, which turns out to be a twisted reflection of Sonic the Hedgehog named Shadow the Hedgehog, who dubs himself as the ultimate Lifeform. Shadow goes on a rampage implicating Sonic because of how similar these two look, which then effectively makes Sonic on the run from a private military company, the Guardian Citizens of Nations, aka GUN. That is just the setup of the story. I haven't even touched just the general scope of SA2's narrative. Eggman is informed by Shadow the Hedgehog that if he collects all 7 Chaos Emeralds, he can have full power over the space colony Ark, which is a gargantuan space station built after his late grandfather Gerald Robotnik, which bears an uncanny resemblance to the Death Egg. So this launches a quest for the Chaos Emeralds between the heroes and the villains, which is typical of that of a Sonic game. What I love most about Adventure 2's story is just how unashamed it is and unafraid to play with all these interesting concepts. You have a rivalry between two main leads that are moral mirrors of each other. You have an unraveling mystery centered around this newcomer. You have the main hero of your franchise on the run from the police. And probably the highest stakes a Sonic story has seen up to this point. And that's not even factoring in the absolute jaw-dropping moments. One thing no one can take away from SA2 is its memorability. I already showcased the opening of Sonic skidding down the streets of San Francisco, but what I didn't show is him running down a street and fleeing from a giant armored GUN truck that is absolutely wrecking shit. The main cast taking a NASA rocket from a hidden Egyptian military base that was concealed inside of a pyramid, or Eggman blowing up half of the moon just because he can to demonstrate his new power, and proceed to negotiate with the fucking president over full control of the entire world. There's also the prison island explosion, so many things that occurred during the final act. This story is cinematic by every means of the word, and that is further portrayed with the improved cinematography and direction of all of these cutscenes. While they haven't aged the best, they are a drastic improvement from its predecessor and still have their cool moments. But a story is nothing without its characters, and how does SA2 do on that front? Well, starting off, we have Sonic, who is just as good as ever. There's not much to say about Sonic in this game, and that's pretty much the point of his character. There's usually not a lot to say about Sonic. He's adventurous, he's playful, he's a badass. But one thing to note here is that Sonic is considerably a lot more snarky and jocular in this game than he has been in previous material. And that's because Shiro Maekawa thought it would be appropriate to implement a lot more of the American side of Sonic into the Japanese version. Which, if you're unfamiliar with American Sonic, which I don't know how you would be, is portrayed to take things a lot less seriously than his original counterpart. I like this, I really do. Out of all the writers who have handled this character, I do think Maekawa's variant is the best, and it's just a perfect assimilation of all the different interpretations of the character. It makes him more lively and more fun, while simultaneously not sacrificing what makes Sonic, well, Sonic. Switching over to Tails, you can really see the consistency between both adventure games in regards to the way they handled their characters. In Adventure 1, Tails' main arc was learning to do things by himself, was learning to stand out on his own whenever Sonic is not there, to basically walk on his own 2 feet. And you see that when he saves Station Square from Eggman all by himself. He defeats Sonic's main nemesis on his own. And because of that, he gains a new confidence and a new appreciation for himself, just overall has his self-worth uplifted. And it was a really beautiful arc, and Adventure 2 continues that very much by having Tails be a lot more confident and outgoing in this game. Tails' gameplay in SA1 was really thematic because it was him trying to race against Sonic, which was blatant symbolism for him always chasing Sonic and trying to basically be a hero of his own and stand out. Well, in SA2, you get to control Tails all on his own. He fights Eggman multiple times throughout the story. The first thing he does is try to break his best friend out of jail. And he has a lot more contributions to this story than he ever has, with the invention of the fake Chaos Emerald and his ability to step up when the need arises. Tails is utilized perfectly in this game, but not as perfectly as another returning character, Amy Rose. Now, a lot of people criticize Amy Rose's portrayal in this game because they feel it undermines her arc in SA1. In the previous game, Amy's arc bore a lot of resemblance to Tails' arc. However, while Tails' arc centered more around self-worth, Amy's arc centered more around independence. Throughout the game, she always yearned for the glory days of adventure, but was stuck leading a pretty mundane, boring life, until she had what was essentially her hero's calling with the arrival of a Flicky, that she then vowed to protect from Eggman. And her gameplay served a thematic purpose like Tails' gameplay in SA1, which was her getting chased relentlessly by this robot, completely unable to do anything about it or defeat the stalker. That is until her final boss, where she finally stands up for herself, wrecks the shit out of it, and reaffirms her passion and love for Sonic and vows to be more initiative with her pursuits, be more outgoing, be more self-reliant. Well, SA2 very much continues that progression, but not in the way you would expect. Instead of having Amy be a complete absolute badass here, but she's proven to be way more capable combat-wise and way more helpful when it comes to discussing stuff with the team like Tails is, Amy still finds herself being the butt of many jokes, constantly being left behind, being held captive as a hostage yet again, and really not being taken seriously, not by Team Sonic, not by the villains, not even really by the writers. But the point of Amy in this game is to be a subversion, where by the end, where you've pretty much assumed that she has nothing to really offer, that's when the scene between her and Shadow come up, where we really get to see Amy's true strength, which no isn't combat resilience, which no isn't brains, but rather her unyielding optimism and her unyielding love for the world.
確かにあそこでは毎日争い事が絶えないし、あのおじいさんが言った通りわがままで自分勝手でバカな人間ばかりかもしれない。でもみんなあそこで生きてんだよ。一生懸命生きて頑張ってる。いつかみんなでもっと幸せになろうって頑張ってる。それだけでもあの星の未来を信じる意味があるわよ。だからお願い。あの星に住むすべての人たちにチャンスを与えてあげて。
The thing about Amy is that she resembles her hero a lot more than people realize. She is completely uncompromising. She is the embodiment of love, the embodiment of passion, and that love, that passion, is what leads to Shadow having his epiphany. It's what leads to Shadow remembering Maria's true wish, which was to use her love to protect the people of Earth. And that conversation wouldn't have happened if Amy wasn't her outgoing self in this game, if she wasn't so undeterred and uncompromising and unyielding, which is what she wasn't at the beginning of SA1. So you really do get to see that character progression play out fully in this game. And it's really nice. It's a brilliant utilization of Amy and what she learned in the previous game. The two characters that don't have much going on is Knuckles and Rouge, and that's because what they lack in depth, they more than make up for in pure comedy and entertainment. Knuckles is his usual stoic but easily flustered self, and Rouge is this scene-stealing, nonchalant, badass spy who always appears unfazed, and I really have always admired and appreciated her cool demeanor in hot situations. And as you can imagine, her easygoing attitude mixed with Knuckles' rough exterior makes for an absolute wonderful dynamic between these two characters. It's always great seeing them interact. And these are two kids who obviously have a immature crush on each other, and it's fun seeing them get all flustered and shy and aggressive with one another. I really do miss these two, just as a duo. Eggman is another major player in this game, and he is the best Eggman has ever been. Makaira gets this character to a T, probably more than he does the others. I've never seen a more perfect mix of silliness and manchildness combined with pure intimidation and madness. That's what this Eggman is. He's still very much in character, being that same goofy, clumsy, wildly entertaining mad scientist, but that 300 IQ of his is not just for show. It's not just a side fact about Eggman. No. He locks the fuck in this game, constantly being multiple steps ahead of the heroes, showing his true, unending depths of unempathy by threatening to blow up the entire world, holding Amy Rose at gunpoint, and mercilessly killing Sonic, or at least what he assumed was him killing Sonic, and a 3000 IQ chess move at that. This is really the best portrayal Eggman has ever gotten in a game ever, and I really love that. But of course I saved the best for last, and that is newcomer Shadow the Hedgehog. Where do I even begin with this character? So when we first meet Shadow, he is very much that generic dark rival that we all assumed he is by design. Whereas Sonic is the embodiment of goodness, Shadow is anything but. He has a dark, intimidating presence, takes no bullshit from anyone, and clearly has evil motives. But as the game progresses, some cracks do start to show. For example, this character has a bit of arrogance to him. One thing a lot of people have forgotten about Shadow is just how arrogant and playful he could be. While yes, he takes things super seriously, he is also self-assured to a fault and will even engage in light banter with his enemies. But the true puzzle starts being formed when we start learning more about his creation. Shadow the Hedgehog is an artificial life form created with the purpose of curing Maria Robotnik, Gerald Robotnik's terminally ill granddaughter. And these two had a very deep bond with one another. with Maria being Shadow's one true friend, one true light in what was basically a dark world and vice versa, which all came to an end when GUN branded Gerald's research as dangerous, traveled to the space colony Ark, killed everyone on board, including Maria, who in her final moments before death sent Shadow away, where he was later recovered and found by Eggman 50 years later. The last thing Maria wanted from Shadow before she sent him away was to claim vengeance on humanity, claim vengeance on the evil creatures that had taken her away from him. And so that has become Shadow's life purpose. And the thing about Shadow's motive here, his goal, is that you can't really blame him. His only exposure of the people of Earth was what they did to him, was what GUN did to him, was what they took from him. And the last thing he has left is the promise he made to his dear friend to avenge her. At least that is how things seemed at first. But as we discussed earlier, Amy's pure optimism and hope drew out an epiphany from Shadow where he remembered what Maria's true promise was, which is for Shadow to protect everyone on Earth and lead a happy life. Which makes what was originally a very artificial, faceless antagonist who we were rooting against feel uncomfortably human, where he actually sheds a tear at the newfound revelation and switches sides, reaffirming who he is. Which is not a vessel for destruction, but a vessel for Maria's love of Earth. And he gives it his all to keep that promise, using all of his energy to sacrifice himself and feel relief having completed it as he falls down back to Earth, his energy completely expended. Not only is Shadow's arc really beautiful, but there's a lot of depth to his character that's really easy to miss on a first playthrough. For example, there's a very haunting question that's posed midway through where Shadow may not even have been real at all. One question you may have is, how did Shadow misremember his best friend's promise? Well, Gerald Robotnik had actually manipulated Shadow's memories, and this draws the haunting question, how many of Shadow's memories were even real to begin with? Is his entire life a lie? Most people assume nothing really ultimately comes from this, but there actually is a bit of contextual evidence that makes this assumption by Rouge a lot more real. Which is the fact that when GUN investigated the pod that Maria had sent out, nothing was found in it. There was no hedgehog in that pod. Now you could weigh this away as the game may be attempting to be misleading, but there's actually more evidence of the idea that none of Shadow's memories was real that comes from Sonic X. That, you guessed it, was co-written by Shiro Maikaira, SA2's main writer. We get to see the POV of a gun soldier who corners Maria, the same gun soldier who takes her life. And you can see from his perspective that Shadow the Hedgehog is not even in the room. He pays no mind to the creature, or lack thereof, that is in the pod Maria is sending out. And he makes no mention of there ever being a ultimate life form in there. So what does this mean? Well, this means that when Gerald Robotnik had messed with Shadow's memories, it actually goes higher than that. Gerald didn't manipulate Shadow's memories, Gerald created Shadow's memories. Shadow and Maria had, in actuality, never met. Shadow's entire life, or the life that he had known, is a lie. Which is something that he is semi-aware of, but is at peace with. Which he explains here in this amazing bit of dialogue.
自分が本当のシャドウだって信じてるの？当然だ。あんたのその記憶こそ偽物かもしれないのよ。たとえ僕の記憶がフェイクだとしても、僕にとってはそれが全てだ。彼女、マリアの願いを叶える。ただそれだけ。
Even if all that he knows is not real, it's real to him. And so really, at the end, when Shadow sacrifices himself for Maria's love, for the promise that he made to her, he's actually sacrificing himself for the promise he made to Amy, for Amy's love for the world and its inhabitants. There's just so many cool things here, and Shadow is a really tragic character. Now, some of you may point out that in recent games and a lot of stuff like Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic X Shadow Generations, it's been confirmed that Maria was a character that had met Shadow, that they actually did know each other, and this is what we call, ladies and gentlemen, a retcon. Remember, Shadow was originally meant to be a one-time character who never showed up again, and so a lot of this was left intentionally ambiguous to provoke folk theorization, and that's what this is, with the majority of the evidence leaning towards the fact that Shadow had never in reality knew Maria. So yeah, all of these characters are done wonderful justice, and even the newcomers bring a lot to the table. But now let's talk about the deeper themes of SA2, that being purity versus artificiality. If this sounds familiar, this is what the entire series is essentially about. Ever since the first game, it's been about nature versus technology. The love of planet Earth versus the threat of industrialization. With Sonic representing nature and Eggman representing technology. And SA2 takes those themes and heightens them further. There's a lot of contextual evidence suggesting that during Gerald's research, he stumbled upon Angel Island, where he came across the mural of Supersonic destroying one of Eggman's Death Egg robots, which was the final boss at the end of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Alongside this prophecy, he would also uncover many things that confirm the existence of perfect chaos. Inspired by this, Gerald would attempt to recreate such miracles in an effort to create something that could be the ultimate life form, that could be the gateway to immortality. And what we see in the later acts of this game is a complete bastardization of nature's miracles. We see a lot of these artificial chaos creatures that are just wrong and unnatural from a design sense. And the biggest evidence of this is the Bio-Lizard, which was an imperfect attempt at recreating perfect chaos, and a failed prototype to the ultimate life form. And we see the theme of purity versus artificiality even take the form of the fake Chaos Emerald that Tails makes, which on the surface appears like a normal emerald, but in actuality doesn't come close to the real thing. And what if I told you that all of these themes is supposed to accumulate to the end of Sonic and Shadow's rivalry? When these two characters first meet, they are in awe at how similar they look to one another, and they disregard the other as just a cheap imitation of themselves. However, throughout the course of the game, they gain a newfound appreciation and respect for one another, even if they are on opposing sides. Well, what if I told you that there actually is a definitive answer to who the true faker is amongst these two? I mentioned the Angel Island prophecy earlier, where Gerald came across the prophecy of Hypersonic. Well, what if I told you that just like how the Bio-Lizard was Gerald's attempt at recreating perfect chaos, Shadow the Hedgehog was Gerald's imperfect attempt at recreating Sonic the Hedgehog, or Supersonic rather. And he created something that on the surface resembles the real thing. He looks just like Sonic, he can run just as fast as Sonic, he has a lot of the same abilities. But in the end, when they both have to use all their energy to defeat the Bio-Lizard, Shadow the Hedgehog is ultimately killed. And the reason for this is something that Shadow draws the conclusion of right before his death, where he informs Sonic that Sonic is actually the true ultimate life form. Sonic was one of nature's miracles that Shadow was an artificial recreation of. And so the main two leads of the game, Sonic and Shadow, is a further representation of how technology's artificiality cannot hold a candle to nature's purity. I love thematic stuff like this, and SA2 is just mwah. Now, before I wrap up this video, I just have to talk about the ending, where after Shadow's heroic sacrifice, it inspires a lot of reflection among the cast, of Sonic really recognizing and respecting Shadow the Hedgehog, Eggman reflecting on his family legacy and his own, actually, and Tails being there to, in a sense, comfort him, Rouge reflecting on herself and how she may give up treasure hunting and be a more selfless person going for a higher cause in the future, and Knuckles being there to support that journey. This is a really beautiful ending, made even more somber by the immaculate music, and what makes this ending so powerful is just the meta context. There's a lot of finality to this game's ending, with a lot of these characters really just reflecting on who they are as people and whether or not they're going to change drastically in the future. And that's because Sonic Team themselves were facing an uncertain future. Sega was down in the dumps, the Dreamcast was an utter failure, and things were looking really dire for not only the parent company, but for Sonic itself. And there could have been a reality in which Sonic Adventure 2 was in fact the final game in the series. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, many years in the future, we know this wasn't the case, but at the time, this was written to be a kind of closing send-off for the entire Sonic the Hedgehog series, and what a send-off it was. And not only does the story we just experienced justice, but it does the entire series itself and what we love so much about it justice as well. There's a good chance that I didn't really say much original stuff in this video, and that's just because SA2 is a game that deservedly gets praised and praised and praised as time goes on, particularly the story. And I just knew I had to follow the trend at some point, because the story of Sonic Adventure 2 is a story that I hold really near and dear to my heart, and with Sonic Movie 3 coming out and adapting many elements of this story, I thought now would be a pretty fitting time to get my own voice out there and really just, in a sense, write a love letter to this game and what I appreciate about it. But with that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, then please leave a like on this video. It really helps. Make sure to subscribe for future Sonic content. And remember, I do have an audio drama coming out on December 31st, a Sonic audio drama. I wrote and produced it, and the voice cast has done a stellar job on it. You can find the first 6 minutes linked here if you want to just, get a taste of what the story is gonna be like. But yeah, I really do appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye for now.